All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So, welcome to another edition of In the News. Can you believe it's already October? I mean, for as wild as this year has been, and this has been one wild year full of many extremities to the point where the extremities literally eclipse the other extremities, it seems that the year has gone by rather quickly, or at least in my opinion, that's what it feels like. And I don't know if that's just because this year has been very eventful, maybe not for good reasons, but it just seems that because there's been so much going on, the time is just all a big blur. Because I feel like it was February like 2 months ago. And now we're in October. You know, it's about to be Halloween. The kids, I don't know what kind of Halloween they're going to be having because I don't know what is the rule with trick-or-treating right now, depending on where people live. Just crazy wild times. But at least we're still here. And at least we're still breathing for those of us who are here. So you know what? Amen to that. But I got to thinking because I saw this post on social media and it was talking about, you know, what was the nastiest candy. And of course, everybody was saying candy corn. Candy corn's been getting fried up since social media became a thing. But you know what I think is worse than candy corn? In addition to peppermint, even though I don't think peppermint's really candy, you know, but I mean, peppermint is only candy when you're a kid in church and the old lady passes you some. Other than that, I don't look at it as candy. It's a mint. But, you know, I think the candy that's always been trash, and I don't even classify it as candy, it's those circus peanuts. You know, those orange, marshmallow, foamy, weird texture things, those. That is some nasty candy. Like, that's some stuff that'll piss you off. I'll always remember, you know, like in elementary when you would do the Valentine's Day parties and people would make the baskets or the envelopes and they decorate them and then all the kids would go around and pass the cards and the candy and stuff out and all that stuff. I'll always remember this kid passed out them darn circus peanuts. We were all looking like, what? First of all, you know, we're out here giving Reese's Pieces, peanut butter cups, and M&Ms, and hearts, and kisses, and, you know, all the fun candy, Jolly Ranchers, and here you come with some circus peanuts. Where'd you even find them things at? And then it doesn't help that they give you the circus peanuts in them big old bags like people want to eat more than one. That's some nasty candy. That and chocolate mint ice cream. That was another thing that would piss me off as a kid. Like, that crap was nasty, too. I can appreciate it now because my taste buds have matured a bit, but in first grade, this girl... It was her birthday, and you know how the kids, they'd always have their parents bring cupcakes or ice cream or cake or something like that if it was their birthday. I was already a hater to begin with because my birthday was in the summer, so I could never have the classroom birthday party, so I always felt some kind of way. But this girl, I didn't even like her like that anyway because she had attitude too much for my liking at recess, but I can't remember her name to save my life though, but she brought chocolate mint ice cream, and I had never had it before at that time. I was looking at it because it was green, and I thought, okay, maybe this is like apple chocolate, like green apple, you know, Granny Smith, because we had just learned about apples and Johnny Appleseed that week. So I was like, okay, I didn't know they made apple ice cream. Let me try this thing. And I took a bite of that crap. What is this? Even though apple chocolate sound nasty too, to be honest. But yeah, chocolate mint, it don't hit at all like that. You can't even put sprinkles on that. That's not even a fun ice cream. That's very nursing home, in my opinion. You don't give that to no 6-year-olds. So I was looking at that girl crazy. And of course, she was running around like she was, high maintenance and everything, because you know she has ice cream. And whenever the kids have their own birthday party or something, they get to pick who gets the cupcakes and stuff first. And if you don't get along with that kid, you know you're getting called last. And so. I'm being silly, y'all, but anyway, moving on to other things. Some of you guys were also asking, who am I doing for the next So What Happened? I think I said it on live, but the next So What Happened is going to be Usher, and it's probably not coming out till November just because it's a lot, man. Those videos, those are my favorite videos to do right now, but they take a lot of effort because you gotta get all the footage, you gotta do the research, and you know it's a full project, and so it's literally like putting together an entire little documentary for real. So I just, you know, I'm really about trying to make sure I have my facts and stuff right. So that's probably gonna come out in November, and then I'll put a poll up for, you know, what you guys want after Usher. I'm leaning towards Janet Demita Joe's era, of course. That's the one I keep seeing a lot of people bring up, but there's some other ones I want to talk about as well. So there's that. What else is going on? Some of the Prince fans, I know y'all are fighting me because I did not get a chance to really talk about Sign of the Times as far as the anniversary edition that was released. I don't even have it yet. I'm gonna get it this week. But if you know, I'm a big Prince fan, and I've found myself lately going down the rabbit hole of Prince videos on YouTube, especially when we were in the stay-at-home order. I spent a lot of time digging through the Prince material. And to be honest, I'm on this project where I'm archiving. I know I'm ranting. We'll get to the stories in a minute, but hell, we talk so much heavy stuff. Let me be light for a few minutes before I piss the rest of y'all off during the second half of the video. But I've been on this mission where I've been archiving, you know, pretty much just finding a bunch of different videos that I like, whether it's performances, concerts, speeches, different events, interviews, just pretty much finding them and then pretty much ripping them from the internet and saving them on a hard drive. Mainly because YouTube always yanks down stuff. There's nothing worse than when you have a favorite video on YouTube and then it's been taken down. I'm like, ugh. All right. So I've been, I bought a special little external hard drive just for all my favorite videos, and I've been getting concerts and everything. So I've been loading up. Just, I don't know, it's kind of the historian in me. I just really like to hold on to things. And then I did get a chance to read some of Mariah Carey's book. I haven't finished it. I'm maybe about a fourth of the way through. Like, she pretty much at this point in the book has just kind of gotten her record deal. If you've had a chance to read the book, you recognize she starts from her childhood and works forward, but while she's still in the childhood, she does reference things that happened in her music career at the same time, so it's kind of taking you into a bunch of different directions. So it's an interesting read for those who want it. I suggest you get the Audible version, though. Like, with the celebrity autobiographies, I often get I normally buy the hard copy, and then I still get it on Audible, but I like to hear the celebrities like talk, tell their story in their voice. You can actually hear them say it, and you can really kind of have a better idea of where they stand and how they feel about the things they're talking about. So, the book so far so good. Anyway, let's get into some stories. So just when you thought 2020 couldn't get any crazier, we find out that there have been 13 men who pretty much had this entire plot to go and kidnap the governor of Michigan. A whole governor. They just said, we're going to start snatching up people. Let's take the governor. We've had enough. And so what's crazy is, one, I do think there are more people involved, but these are the 13 that have just been found out so far. But literally, they had this whole thing mapped out. And so they were buying the supplies, they were buying the weapons. I was watching one of the news stories, and one of the people who was arrested in all of this, he was living in the basement of a vacuum store. Like, the owner of the store felt bad for him and let him live in the basement. And I said, it's always the basement. When folks in the basement too long, you need to start asking questions. But so he was living in the basement, and the owner of the store started to recognize that he was ordering a bunch of random and unique items. And the owner of that store used to be a Marine, so he's like, wait a minute, I kind of figured something ain't right here, because the guy in the basement was ordering a bunch of MREs, like meals ready to eat. And people who order a bunch of those usually are ordering those because they're planning to either not be pretty much they're planning to be off grid, or they're planning to be in a predicament where life is not going to be very normal for them. So maybe they're hiding from something, or maybe they're on the run. And so ordering all these different MREs, ordering all these different extensions and attachments to AK-47s and AR-15s and all these different weapons, walkie-talkies and all this different stuff. And so these people had a whole, plan. This thing was mapped out. And so they were planning to, pretty much kidnap the governor. And this was already like organized. They had been casing out the woman's house. She had a vacation home. They've been paying attention to her whereabouts. One of the things that was discovered was that they were planning to possibly blow up some stuff, so that could be a diversion. So that way, while people are trying to figure out where the explosions originated from, they could go, I guess, on the other side of town and go snatch up the governor. Absolutely wild. But let me tell you where my real issue is, because I got a few. One, I find it interesting that the word militia was used a million times. They kept saying militia. This was a militia group. I kind of have an issue with that, because I'm like, if you're talking about the activity that this group is doing, this is some terrorism type stuff. So that militia crap goes out the window. And the reason I don't even like the word militia, to be honest, is because, one, people associate militia with, America's history. It goes back to the colonies and when they were beefing with Great Britain. And of course, Great Britain has this giant army. The United States, well, we were still the colonies at the time and territories. There was not an army in the United States or in the colonies. So people had a militia because everybody would just kind of get together and try to piece together a little something until they were able to kind of somewhat build an army later down the line as we got closer to the Revolutionary War. And so the idea of militia was all about, people protecting what's theirs and so on and so forth. And so the issue I have is this. What you're seeing now is a lot of people get to hide behind the sheet or the curtain of militia, and behind that curtain and that sheet is a whole bunch of racism and terrorism and all kind of terrible activity, but it gets blanketed under militia, and then militia kind of waters down the extremity and the obscenity of what it is that these groups are doing. So that's beef number one. Beef number two, what I found very interesting is the interview of the sheriff of that area where most of the people were arrested from. Because one, the sheriff indirectly knew some of the people in the group. So let's just play the clip of what the sheriff had to say about this, and then let's have a conversation.
The Null brothers had ties to militia groups and were frequently seen at local demonstrations, including at this rally in protest of Governor Whitmer's stay-at-home order held last May in Grand Rapids. You can see William Null on stage alongside Barry County Sheriff Dar Leaf, a guest speaker at the event. We spoke with Sheriff Leaf Thursday night.
Well, I haven't read everything up on it. I've got other duties to do. It wasn't our investigation. So I was shocked. I did not see this coming with those guys, but still, we can't convict them in the news media here. They do have a right to a fair trial.
Leaf says he doesn't know of Null's alleged involvement in the plot and doesn't have any regrets about sharing a stage with him.
Do you have any regrets from being on stage, sharing a stage with a guy who's now being charged in a plot to kidnap the governor?
Well, it's just a charge, and they say a plot to kidnap. And you got to remember that, are they trying to kidnap? Because a lot of people are angry with the governor, and they want her arrested. So are they trying to arrest, or was it a kidnap attempt? Because you can still, in Michigan, if it's a felony, you can make a felony arrest. And I think it's MCL 764.4 or something like that, 0.5, somewhere around there. And it doesn't say if you're an elected office that you're exempt from that arrest. So I have to look at it from that angle, and I'm hoping that's more what it is. In fact, these guys are innocent until proven guilty, so I'm not even sure if they had any part in it.
So here's my question. Like, how did we go from a terrorist group that has made this elaborate plan to go and kidnap a government official using weapons, using explosives? They've cased this woman's house. They figured out her entire schedule. They probably know when she's going to have a security detail, when she's not. They know when she's going to sleep. They know what time she's going to walk the dog. They know what time the cat's going to be let out to run in the yard. They know exactly what time the Girl Scouts are going to show up with the cookies. They know what time the mailman is coming. They know when the cable man is going to come. They know what time she turns on the house lights. They know when she comes out to get the newspaper. Like, they figured all that stuff out. How did it go from that to these are some people who were just frustrated and they were going to make a citizen's arrest? You got to be kidding me. You had people in this specific group already plotting and loading up on food because they already knew that their life would never be the same after they committed this action. And you're going to sit here and try to pretend that these are just honest American citizens who are using their God-given rights as Americans to challenge the status quo and make a citizen's arrest. And you can even arrest government officials, section code 234. Shut up. Like, come on. And to be honest, I personally think that this officer or this sheriff is in on that same mess too. He knows a whole lot more than what he's saying, because it's interesting that, he indirectly knows these people. He was at the rally that they've been at, and not at the rally working security or trying to maintain order, because, that's what the president is all about lately, law and order. But I notice he hasn't really critiqued this at all. He spent his time frying up the governor because she should have been thankful that the FBI, discovered everything. I was like, anyway, this ain't even about him today. I ain't doing it. But, you know what I mean? And so this sheriff is literally at the event on the stage. He's on the mic too. He's on the mic spitting bars with them. And so now all of a sudden, it's just interesting to see the amount of grace and poise he has for them. Oh, I would certainly hope that wasn't what they were doing. Oh, I'd certainly hope that wasn't what they were doing. It's just everybody, let them have their day in court. They haven't been convicted of anything. These are just charges. You're innocent until proven guilty. I'm like, you see how the game gets played depending on who's in it, who the pieces are. Let's be honest here. Had those 13 men been born in Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq, the way the United States would have been painting this out to be a big, giant, major terrorist attack where our government officials were in grave danger and our liberty and our freedom and our democracy was under attack again by the terrorists and everything else like that, the way the United States would have been already loading up the bombs and the drones, we would have been over there flattening everything right now as I speak. But because these are white men, all of a sudden it's, they were using their rights to be citizens and make a felony arrest. Citizen's arrest. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Because if that's the case, to be honest, a lot of us are pissed off with a lot of politicians. If that's how simple, if it can be that simple, I got a lot of beefs with a whole lot of folks, and I got a whole list. Just kidding, I didn't say that. I don't need the government coming after me. But what I'm saying is absolutely crazy. And it don't even have to be that they would be from the Middle East. It can just be black folks. You saw what happened with the Move bombing, and the United States still tries to act like that didn't happen. They won't even give an apology for that, all them kids and them babies that they blew up. And then even when you talk about how a lot of the Black Panthers were framed, or even somebody like Assata Shakur, it's interesting when you go back and you look at the logistics of that case in New Jersey and how literally it pretty much almost got thrown out because the police had such dirty, corrupt work when it came to them trying to cover up and set her up. But literally, or even if the group was Latino, they would have tied this and they would have been up there making speeches about MS-13 did this and it was the drug propaganda and that's why we got to build the wall. But now all of a sudden you got these 13 white men who are literally doing the utmost obscene thing you can think of, using bombs. They're ready to blow up some stuff to go snatch up somebody, mainly because they don't want to wear a mask, because they feel that the government is too big, the government is too intrusive in their lives, and so on and so forth. And so their only way to be heard is to go incite violence. And somehow that is making a citizen's arrest, and it's not terrorism. terrorism. You see how the roles get reversed? Like when the game pieces change depending on who's playing the game. I ain't got time for it. That's some BS. And so that sheriff, they need to really investigate, because I personally feel that he has a little bit more ties than what he's leading on to be as true. Just the whole, I would hope that wasn't them. No, you need to treat that sheriff the same way they did Frankie and set it off. Remember, Darnell robbed her bank, and Darnell just lived in her apartment complex, and Frankie got fired just because she knew the person that robbed the bank, and the guy that owned the bank was talking about, what happens the next time one of your friends robs the bank? How do we know you're not in collusion? Okay, y'all need to check that sheriff and see if he in collusion with somebody. Something ain't right in the water. That's all I'm saying. And then it gets even deeper, because there was an article I saw, or not even an article, it was a stupid tweet that I saw. Let me read this tweet. Because I found it absolutely just like, you got to be kidding me. And it goes back to the same argument that I was making as far as how they will paint different narratives depending on who it is that's doing the action. And so this was from some dude named Walker Bragg, man. And he shows a picture of one of the homes of one of the people that was arrested. And he says, I'm going to have it on the screen for y'all. This is the home of Joseph Morrison, one of the Michigan men recently arrested for his plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Can we acknowledge that maybe economic circumstances play a role in radicalizing people? So let's talk about what we're not going to do tonight. And it's that kind of BS, because I'm sorry, I recognize that there are a lot of people in this country who are hurting economically. And there are a lot of people who are living in the realms of economic despair, because we know that 1 in 10 Americans live below the poverty line. The poverty rate in the United States right now is 11.3%. And that's pre-COVID. But what you're not going to do is sit here and pretend that these 13 men have had it so hard that it gives them justification to go and try to blow up some stuff and kidnap folks, especially when black folks exist. Because at least in the claim of black Americans have had literally every law created to work against them. And the crazy part about all of this, every disparaging law that has ever been created against another race of people has been created to benefit that same group of 13 men. So unfortunately, because capitalism, somebody has to still be at the bottom. They got the crappy end of the deal, and they're at the bottom cast with other groups of people. And because they hold on to whiteness, they feel that they should have more. So when they see anybody else have anything more than them, they feel that the whole system is screwed over, and people want to keep giving them a pass to say, well, that's why they do the things they do. I'm sorry, well then why aren't black people blowing up everything and shooting up everything? We got laws working against us. There are ordinances that said you couldn't do this, you couldn't have this kind of housing, you couldn't have this kind of job, you couldn't live on this side of town, you couldn't get this kind of education, you couldn't get this kind of health care, you couldn't even freaking vote. Your voting rights are still under attack. You're seeing the foolishness happen even in this election. Why is it that when it comes to the election, you see so much voter suppression, and it's only for one specific group of people? It's always just specifically us. They don't really care about the Latino vote, because they recognize the Latino vote is kind of any and everywhere, because the Latino community does not vote as one collective, because they have a bunch of different ideals and viewpoints. Pretty much in all reality, the Latino and Hispanic community, what they have in common for some of them is really just that they speak Spanish. Other than that, they have a bunch of different views, even religiously, politically. But when it comes to the black collective, everybody knows that black people tend to vote majority Democrat and everything. And so you keep seeing GOP candidates and people in leadership constantly gerrymander, redraw districts, try to put as many black folks in one district as they can. Go and look what they did in North Carolina. Go and look what they did in Illinois. Like, they know what they're doing. And so we have everything that works against us, and it's enforced by the federal government, and has been. And you're going to sit here and try to paint these 13 men out to just life was so tough, and so it's justified, so let's talk about why they're radical. No, it's privilege. In all reality, the privilege of knowing that because you look like this, you should have had more than the next person that looked like this. And even if y'all just have the same thing, there's still a problem with that, because you're supposed to have more, because they recognize that they didn't have a system working against them, and they still ended up at the bottom. That's what that crap is about. And so we're not pulling that out. I'm sick of hearing that crap, because they did that when Trump got in there. Oh, well, it was the blue-collar American who they felt left out of the American dream. And I'm like, well, I know about 45 million people collectively who fall into that same boat. You know what I mean? And so we're not doing that. I'm sorry. Use that bootstrap rhetoric y'all use on us. Don't be trying to be all sympathetic now. I don't want to hear that. Y'all don't do that every time there's any kind of violence in any inner city, or when you hear like violence and, they bring up Chicago, they bring up Baltimore, they bring up St. Louis, they bring up New Orleans, they bring up DC. You don't ever hear them say, oh, well, it's just the economic disparities and they're just frustrated. And that. No, then all of a sudden we thugs and criminals and we need to be locked up and in the cages and everything else. And now all of a sudden, now we want to have empathy. And everybody's trying to pull out the sympathy card, and everybody wants to be a therapist, and these fools are about to blow up some stuff. That's why we in the mess we in now. Y'all keep letting foolery come into power. I cannot. I cannot. I ain't doing it. I'm not doing it. And this is not me saying that I don't have sympathy or empathy for people who have less than. not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that is not a justification for people to go and blow up stuff. And again, it's almost a selective action, in my opinion, where you're having selective empathy for only some groups of people, because every single time white Americans who kind of live in an economic environment where they don't have a whole lot do something terrible, that's the first card they put. Well, they had a really tough upbringing and they had this and they had that. But then that same thing is weaponized against black folks. Oh, well, his father wasn't in the house, that's why he's sorry now. So we're not doing that. Absolutely not. And then it just, dang, man, foolery. I want to go on. Who's this person's name again? I'm going to send him a tweet tonight. I'm going to let him. Who is this? Walker Bragman. Yeah, I'm about to see you later on. But foolery. And it's just crazy. Like, even with this whole idea of a citizen's arrest, I don't even like that, because it makes people feel authoritative in any kind of position. And you only feel authoritative if you feel superior to somebody. And so, no, that, like, and it even goes to, like, the poll watching, where you got people showing up to the polls with guns talking about they're poll watchers. Y'all gonna come up on the right person at the wrong time. Keep playing around with folks. That's all I'm saying. And another example of this same argument is that even when there are laws and ordinances created to right the wrongs, there is still disparities and there's still discrimination and there's still oppressive actions, because right now you have Yale University in the middle of a lawsuit because they're being sued because people feel that white and Asian students are being discriminated against because of affirmative action. And it's interesting because I'm like, y'all are acting like Yale is Black Utopia over there. Last time I checked, Yale is still pretty pale. But, all of a sudden, because a few folks got in and some folks didn't, and they feel that all of a sudden people who are undeserving got into their seats. It's kind of like that girl, Abby out of Texas. You remember she did the whole affirmative action lawsuit, and one didn't even have the credentials to get into freaking school. But same thing all over again. So that's not what we're doing tonight. We're just not doing that tonight. We're not. Absolutely not. Anyway, let's move on. Y'all got me all in my feelings. I was in a good mood when we started this video. Anyway, on to the next story. And I know you all see the shenanigans in relation to what's happening around the Breonna Taylor case, right? Some clownery, right? Daniel Cameron, you playing games, man. We see you. If you remember, the initial charges were announced and there was a lot of public backlash because it felt like pretty much, okay, everybody pretty much got off slap on the wrist. The officer that was charged got charged for putting other people from an apartment nearby in danger because he shot into the building. And so people are like, wait a minute. But the actual person who was also in danger, who ended up dying and got shot multiple times, there's no charges for that, but you're going to charge for the fact that somebody else could have possibly got shot when you still shot somebody anyway. So people are like, something doesn't add up here. And then you had people on the grand jury say, wait a minute, hold on. There was information that was not told to us, and we were told that specifically these were the only charges we could really pursue, and we didn't know that we had an opportunity to go after this and go after that. We want all the proceedings released to the public, right? So, of course, Daniel Cameron and crew were like, oh, well, we can't do that. We need to lock that up. So they tried to get the motions to delay as much as they could. But eventually, everything still had to be put out there. Now the stuff has been put out there. But, of course, this is hours and hours and hours upon footage. So, people are dissecting it and seeing what they can get out of the footage. And, of course, magically, guess what appears? A picture of Breonna Taylor holding a gun. I said, y'all play this game every single time. And so, of course, we know what the intentions are. Because I'm like, why are the police releasing this photo? Like, y'all done went through this woman's social media, and you must have dug deep to find that. And so it's like, that's kind of like just the bait they had waiting in the corridor. Because they knew once stuff would get out, all right, let's put something out there. Let's paint Breonna Taylor to be exactly what we tried to paint her out to be the first time. Because, of course, when you go back to the plea deal that they tried to give the other ex-boyfriend, who they actually were looking for something totally unrelated to Breonna Taylor. But, they tried to have him make a plea and say, oh, well, she was the suspect in the case with me and she was my co-defendant, and that way it would kind of justify them going in there and shooting her. Of course, he turned that down, said absolutely not, started talking to the media. But of course, a picture with her holding a gun helps to push the narrative that she is a violent person and she somehow deserved to die because now all of a sudden she has a gun. And I find it funny because this is a full contradiction of just what we talked about in the last story. Where, in the last story, it was militia. It's people who, they carry their guns. They don't like big government. They want to be left alone. They had an issue with the response to COVID-19. They didn't like that the governor in Michigan had stay-at-home orders and had mask mandates. And, they were phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. They didn't like any of that. They had free reign to go in and roam the Capitol with weapons and guns and stand out there and protest and everything else like that. Second Amendment all day, NRA. We're going to do it all because that's the American way. Now all of a sudden you got a black woman who gets killed by the police. And if you remember, we keep having this conversation about why a lot of people pretty much indirectly see the police as an extension of themselves, depending on how they view the world and depending on the privileges that the world gives them. And so it plays into that same narrative because, of course, those privileges don't go to somebody like a Breonna Taylor or Kenneth Walker. And so now you're seeing that happen where they're trying to vilify Breonna Taylor and paint her out to be violent, because as a black person in this country, it doesn't take a whole lot for people to turn on you collectively when it comes to empathy and sympathy with the fact that you've died, especially if there's any kind of conversation surrounding the police. You know, as a black person, unfortunately, in this country, and I'll even say with brown people as well in this country, when they are unjustifiably killed by the police, or if they end up in any kind of situation where police brutality is a part of the conversation, people want hurdles and miracle workers and all kinds of exceptions and a whole lot to even feel any kind of empathy, to even feel any kind of element of, okay, I understand. And so once you finally do all that, they're like, okay, we're here with you. But the minute there is one tiny small discrepancy, all that goes back out the window and it's back to business as usual. That's what happened with Trayvon Martin. You know what I mean? The story comes out that there's this teenager that's like 15 or 16 that gets killed. It's, oh my goodness, and there's this sympathy, and what happens? They release a picture of Trayvon Martin holding up his middle fingers, and they, oh my God, he uses profanity. And I'm like, what teenager doesn't? Okay, even them kids I work with, I tell them all the time, I know all of y'all cuss, that's what teenagers do, just don't do it in my center, don't do it in front of me, and please don't do it in front of any other adults that you have any respect for. Like, just, you know, pretty much, you know, do what y'all do amongst yourselves, because that's what teenagers do. And of course, you know, that's the experience for many teenagers. But they painted Trayvon Martin out to be this thug now, and this, that, and the third, and oh my God, he used the middle finger, and so, you know, they paint him out to be this violent criminal, and so on, and he was so much taller than George Zimmerman, y'all. I'm like, okay, now he's a monster too. Oh, here we go. And so you're just seeing that same pattern every single time. Folks ain't falling for it. Well, some folks still are because they just don't care. But this crap is getting so old, and it's just redundant. You know what I mean? If they could have found a picture of Tamir Rice doing something he wasn't supposed to, they would have put that out too, if we're being honest. Anyway, we'll see what happens with this story as it continues to unfold. But there's a lot of shenanigans going over there in Louisville. That's all I'm saying. And so we've talked blackfishing before in a few videos. Mainly it was always in response to more so the cosmetic side, where people go and they put on a bunch of layers of darker makeup, or they tan really, really, you know, dramatically, or put on 80 different layers of, what do you call it, the bronzer and all that stuff. And people use it to pretty much have their come-ups when it comes to like Instagram and everything else like that. And a lot of people love the element of trying to appear to be exotic. I really can't wait to do a video on just the term exotic in itself, because that's a really interesting conversation to have. But we'll do it on a different video because this one's already getting long. But you know, we always talk about it in that aspect, but you know, I don't think we really talk about it that much when it comes to crime. And so I noticed that there has been a trend where you see a lot of people pretty much doing the same thing to commit crimes. We saw the story where there was the man, he made like a really high quality prosthetic mask that made him look like a black man, and then he went and robbed all these different banks. And I mean, he was cleaning house on these banks because nobody could really figure out that, wait a minute, this is actually not that person, and it turned out to be a white individual. But then we just saw this story about, unfortunately, this man who killed the mother of his daughter, and pretty much did something similar. Let me read a piece of the article here, and it says, earlier this week, Andrew Charles Beard, 33, surrendered himself to Carleton police after learning a warrant had been issued for his arrest. Beard is charged with murder in connection with the death of Alyssa Burkett, his baby girl's mother, but authorities allege that in an attempt to avoid detection, Beard actually donned a fake beard and applied dark makeup to his entire face. Citing a copy of the arrest affidavit, the Carleton Leader reports that the police allege Beard, a white man, tried to shield his identity from security cameras and witnesses. It worked. At least 2 witnesses did, in fact, report that it was a black suspect who shot Burkett in the head before stabbing her repeatedly. That's actually terrible, isn't it? So condolences to Miss Burkett, and I feel bad for the baby as well, because, you know, the baby at this point really is not going to have either parent. But it's just interesting that you keep seeing that same pattern. And the problem with something like that is that it's very dangerous for other people, because imagine if you're a black person in that area and they're looking for a black suspect that just killed a white woman. Come on. You know, it goes back to when we did the Bethany Storrell story, where there was the woman who pretty much threw acid on her face and then said a black woman had attacked her. And this was coming out of Vancouver, Washington. And if you look at the racial demographics of a place like Vancouver, Washington, not Vancouver, BC, the big fun one with all the big high rises. No, Vancouver, Washington, the little fort town. You know, there's not a very large black population. And so imagine what it's like to be a black woman in that town, because she said it was a black woman that did it, and everybody's looking at you wondering if you're the woman who threw acid on this poor woman's face, who had this whole media campaign and trail, and then they were showing the pictures of her face and face all half green and everything. And then it turned out she did it to herself and put the whole, just framed the whole story. I'm like, people just, sometimes we're living in some people's head just rent free. It's absolutely terrible. If you're gonna do your shenanigans, don't dress up as me while you do it. Don't do that. No, you can go do somebody else. Goodness. Actually, don't do anybody. You own up to your foolery. You want to do some foolish stuff, you be the face of it. Quit putting that on other people. Trifling. So for those of you who are really big fans of Selena, Netflix has announced that there's going to be a Selena series that's coming in December. And initially I was like, do we need one? Because, the movie was really good. And the movie, I think, was something that introduced a lot of people to Selena. Because even when I think back to being a child, I kind of knew who she was, but I didn't at the same time. I remember always hearing I Could Fall in Love on the radio, but I never knew that was her until I saw the movie years later. I was like, oh, okay. Sometimes there's songs you remember hearing as a child, but you couldn't put a face to the song. Because, of course, this is also the era when radio still was actually important. But, and so I was like, okay. And then another cool thing with, a series versus a biopic is that a biopic can only give you so much, because it's going to usually be within, about an hour and a half, 2 hours sometimes. Sometimes, if they really got a good budget, you might get 2 hours and 20 minutes. But a series, they can really go in depth, and they can really stretch it and really give you some good detail. I think that's why the Jackson 5 American Dream one was so good, because it was a full series. But, again, with Selena, I think it'll be really cool to see that as a series. Because, again, even with the biopic, sometimes they have to piece together stuff, and sometimes they'll merge together multiple people and create like a magical character that addresses things that happen with multiple people. I know in the Tina Turner movie they did that, where, in the movie it was one of the Ikettes who introduced her to Buddhism, but in reality, she ends up being introduced to Buddhism from a totally different person. But, they kind of just did what they did to make the movie what they wanted it to be. And so, I think a series would be cool. Plus, I always like Selena. I think I liked her live performances a lot more than some of the studio versions of her songs, because it really, I felt like her gift was performing. If you've ever watched a lot of her performances, especially as she got later into her career, she was always in good voice. Always in good voice. It was so funny. I was watching this clip one time because, I get in them YouTube rabbit holes and start watching stuff. And she was doing one of the shows. It wasn't the Astrodome show that everybody always references where she has on the purple suit. It was a different one. But she was doing that that song about the guy in apartment 512. She was tearing that song up. She got to the end because, she gets the grounding. I was like, oh, Selena, sing that song. She was going in on the song. And then I always liked the song No Me Queda Más. No Me Queda Más. I went and tried to look up what the lyrics were about. I had to translate it because my Spanish is terrible. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, this is deep here. All right, she got some little gems. It would have been cool to see where her career would have gone had she still been here. Plus, she was a really, really, really big fan of R&B. Like, huge fan of R&B. You look at her early performances. She's doing all these New Jack Swing performances. She was performing Ralph Tresvant, Sensitivity. She was performing Janet Jackson songs. She was even doing house music. She was doing Black Box, Everybody. And, she used to knock out some footwork, so I ain't mad at her. So that'll be interesting. I'll probably watch. Speaking of, what else have I been watching? I'm behind on Lovecraft Country, by the way. I got to catch up. I'm on episode 6. That's the one where he's in Korea. But I got to get to the last 2. I'm trying to catch up before the new episode airs. But, again, that's been an interesting watch. But yeah, that'd be cool. So, we'll see what happens with the Selena series. I'll probably talk about it as it airs. Anyway, moving on. And then did you all see this story about the woman who, she gave her son up for adoption, but then she started a GoFundMe. Actually, she started a bunch of GoFundMes and pretended that the son had died and was trying to raise money, even though the son is alive and well and with a new family. I was like, that's crazy. And then the worst part, I didn't realize the son wasn't a baby. I thought this was a baby that was like maybe had just been born, and then she tried to pull that story. No, the child was 4. I was like, wow. So, the child had already been raised with you to an extent, so the child already has a memory of you, and that's another conversation, and everybody's going to have a different experience, so I'm not even going to get into that part. But I do think that's a very, very tacky thing to do, as far as, you give your son up for adoption and then you want to make some money off of him at the same time. Come on. And I am one who definitely believes that sometimes when you come into money for bad reasons, or you've done something terrible to get what it is that you have, it's going to somehow come back to bite you later down the line. Like, that's just... And it's like, with a GoFundMe, like, you are literally pulling on the heartstrings of people. Because again, if somebody finds out, oh my gosh, a child has died, people, they're passionate, they have compassion, they have empathy, they want to meet you where you are. They're going to do what it is that they can do to help ease your situation, because they feel that with the vulnerability that you have put out there to share your story and to ask for help and everything, people are like, I have to do something. And it doesn't help that a lot of times the most charitable people tend to be the people who already don't have it to begin with. However, they understand what it's like to be in a bad predicament, and so they do everything to try to appease and try to help somebody, because that's just how a lot of people are. There are a lot of really good people out there. If you follow me for a long time, you remember I told you one of the kids I work with died in 2016, and it was very unexpected. It was like a brain tumor situation, and really sad, by the way. Now I'm all in my feelings thinking about it. But we started a GoFundMe for the funeral because, again, this was something that happened so unexpectedly. Parents don't plan to bury a child. Like, literally, we found out he had a tumor, I want to say around April, and he was going by September. And so, I remember we started this GoFundMe, and when I tell you the amount of money that came in, and it wasn't coming from like these super multi-millionaire donors who heard about the story. No, it was just like everyday people in the neighborhood and everything like that. And it's just, again, like, people, when they hear about tragedy and things like that, it's just something that makes people stop and be grateful for the good experiences that they currently have at the moment, and it helps them to recognize, like, okay, things could be worse. So whatever it is that I'm complaining about or that I have an issue with, I could be in a worse off situation. Let me be grateful for what it is that I, what I'm experiencing or what it is that I have. And people go on and, they donate. So for her, I'm like, come on. And then I read she ain't even get no money after all that. Nobody even donated because people just realized something wasn't right in the water. And apparently she had multiple GoFundMes, and one of them even said the son had went blind. And I'm just like, you know what? Okay. That's some crazy mess. That's not good. Let's do better, people. So I'm going to wrap it up, but I do want to say I hope everybody who was in the pathway of Hurricane Delta is staying safe. Like, it's crazy because this has been a very, very active hurricane season. Like, to the point where, they're now on the Greek alphabet when it comes to names because they've already gone through the first 26 or as far as named storms. So I hope everybody's being safe. I was glad to hear that it had kind of been downgraded before it hit landfall, because at one point it was almost a Category 4. I think by the time it got to landfall, it was Category 2, but the problem is that same area had just been hit a few weeks ago, 6 weeks ago? And so they're still already kind of in recovery mode, where you have people who still had tarps on their roofs because, stuff was still getting repaired, and then boom, here comes another one. I'm like, man. So again, I hope everything works out for everybody in the affected areas. Please stay safe. And yeah, we shall see. Well, I'll catch you guys up on whatever else is next once I have something else going on. Anyway, I'm out. Share your 2 cents. Subscribe.
It's a parade. I'll go the extra mile for you. Let me serenade. Tell me if you want me to. 'Cause you're special. You bring a kind of magic to my life. You're so special. Dance into the night, I hold your body tight. So you hit my phone, I'll check your text.